The great palace of the Aurelian Empire stood high above the capital city, shining under the evening sky like a mountain of gold and white stone. Its tall towers cut through the clouds, and its silver banners moved softly in the wind. Inside, the royal court was filled with light music and the quiet pride of power. But on this day, something felt wrong. The main hall was more crowded than usual. Ministers stood in long lines near the walls. Officers of the royal guard watched every corner with sharp eyes. Noble families filled the upper balconies, dressed in rich colors and jewels. No one laughed. No one spoke loudly. The air felt heavy, as if a storm was waiting inside the room. At the center of the hall stood Unveil, the only human officer in the inner palace service. He did not wear bright armor or noble silk. His uniform was simple and dark, marked only by the silver crest of royal service on his chest. He was not born into power. He had no rich family, no title, and no great name. Yet many people in the palace knew him. Some respected him. Others feared the trust he had earned. Un was calm, loyal, and hard to fool. He spoke little, listened well, and never chased power. That was the very reason the Empress had trusted him for years, and that was also why many people wanted him. Gone at the far end of the hall, high above the court, the throne waited beneath a wide glass dome. On it sat Empress Lyra Vane, ruler of the Aurelian Empire. She looked as she always did before the court, cold, perfect, and untouchable. Her silver crown shone like frozen fire. Her long, dark robe fell around the throne like night itself. But Un noticed something others did not. Her right hand was slightly shaking. Only for a moment. Only once. But he saw it. A royal herald stepped forward and struck the floor with a golden staff. By order of Her Imperial Majesty, he called, his voice echoing across the hall. The court will now witness a matter of royal judgment. A low whisper moved through the nobles. Un remained still. His face did not change, but his mind sharpened. He had been called to court with no warning. That alone was strange. The Empress always preferred private talks for serious matters. Public judgment was not her way. Then why now? The herald opened a scroll and began to read. Unveil, officer of the inner palace service. By direct order of the throne, you were removed from duty and commanded to leave the imperial palace before nightfall. The hall went silent. For a few seconds, it felt as if even the air had stopped moving. Then came the whispers. Banished? What did the human do? So it finally happened. I told you, he stood too close to the throne. From the upper balcony, one noble woman covered her mouth in shock. Another smiled behind her fan, near the left pillar. A group of ministers exchanged quick looks of satisfaction. Yuan did not move. He looked only at the Empress. Her face was still calm. Her back was straight. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was clear and sharp enough to cut the room in two. You will surrender your palace seal and leave these grounds before the final bell, she said. You are not to return unless commanded. The words struck like cold iron. Anyone else might have shouted. Anyone else might have begged for mercy, demanded answers, or fallen into panic. Yuan did none of those things. He stepped forward once, slowly, and knelt with quiet control. Then he removed the silver service badge from his chest. The little crest caught the light for one last second before he placed it on the polished floor. As you command, Your Majesty, he said. His voice was steady. That surprised the court. More than the order itself. The Empress said nothing more. But Un saw her eyes. For one small moment. Hidden behind all her royal strength, there was pain there. Not anger, not hatred. Pain that made no sense. He rose to his feet and turned to leave. As he walked through the center of the hall, the whispers followed him like insects. Some voices mocked him. some pitied him, some simply watched in silence, happy to see a trusted man fall as UN reached the great doors. He noticed Chief Minister Sarek standing near the throne steps. The old minister's mouth carried the smallest hint of a smile. It vanished quickly, but UN saw it. That smile troubled him more than the order. Outside the hall, the palace corridors felt colder than before. 2 guards escorted him to his chambers, not as enemies, but not as friends either. The message was clear: he was already a stranger here. He packed only a few things: a change of clothes, a small data pad, a worn metal coin from Earth, the one item he had kept since childhood. Nothing more. When he was done, he looked around the room one last time. He had lived here for 5 years. 5 years of service. 5 years of quiet duty. 5 years of trust that had ended in one public command, or had it? As he left the palace grounds, the sun was falling behind the city towers. The final light turned the white walls gold and red, like a fire dying slowly. Above him, the palace windows reflected the sky like broken glass at the outer gate. Unstopped and looked back. High above, in a distant tower window, he thought he saw a dark figure watching him. The shape did not move. Maybe it was the Empress. Maybe it was the Empress. Maybe it was someone else. He turned away and walked down into the lower city, where the streets were narrow and the lights were dim. By full dark, he had rented a small room above an old shop. 'Twas quiet, plain, and far from the beauty of the palace. He sat alone on the edge of the bed, replaying every second of the court in his mind. The shaking hand, the cold order, the pain. In her eyes, the minister's smile. Something was wrong. Very wrong then. Deep in the silence of the night, someone knocked on his door. 3 soft knocks. Yuan stood at once. No one here knew him. No one should have come. His hand moved slowly toward the small tool blade near the table. He stepped to the door and opened it, and there, in the dark hall outside his room, stood Empress Lyra. She was alone. Her hood had fallen back, and tears were shining on her face. Un stood frozen at the doorway. For one long second, he could not believe what he was seeing. The ruler of the Aurelian Empire. The woman who had cast him out of the palace only hours ago was standing outside his small rented room in the lower city. She had no guards, no royal lights, no symbols of power. Her dark cloak was wet from the night mist, and her face looked pale under the weak hall lamp, and she was crying. Not loudly, not like a child. The tears were silent, almost hidden, but they were there. The Empress quickly looked behind her into the empty corridor, then back at him. Her voice came out low and shaking. "Please," she said, "do not let anyone see me here." That was enough to break Wuhan out of his shock. He stepped aside at once and let her enter. He closed the door carefully, then locked it. The room suddenly felt too small. It was a poor place, with one bed, one chair, a narrow table, and an old window that looked over the dark street below. The only light came from a weak wall lamp. Light made the room look even simpler, even colder. The Empress stood in the middle of it, breathing hard, as if she had run a long way, for the first time in many years. She did not look like a ruler. She looked tired. She looked afraid. Yuan stayed near the door. He did not move closer. He did not bow. He did not know what this moment was supposed to be. The Empress slowly lowered her hood. Her dark hair was loose now, not held by jewels or royal pins. Without the crown, without the throne, she seemed younger than she had in court. Too young for the weight she carried. Ere finally spoke. "You ordered me out of the palace," he said. His voice was calm, but there was pain under it. "Why are you here?" The Empress opened her mouth, but no words came. She turned away. For a second, as if trying to gather her strength. Her hands were trembling again. I noticed that and frowned. This was not normal fear. This was the fear of someone who had nowhere left to stand. When she faced him again, her eyes were red. "I had no choice," she said. The words hung in the room between them. Yuan said nothing. She took one slow breath. "If I had kept you near me, you would not have survived the week." His expression changed, but only slightly. Then the banishment was a lie. "It was protection," she said at once. "The only kind I could still give." Un looked at her in silence. He wanted to ask many things, but he let her continue. "The palace is no longer safe," the Empress said. "Not for you. Not for me." Outside, somewhere far below, a transport horn sounded in the night. In the room, no one moved. Yuan spoke. "Carefully, who is threatening you?" The Empress gave a weak, bitter smile. "If I knew all their names, I would not be standing in this room." That answer was more frightening than any direct warning. She stepped toward the table and placed one hand on it, as if she needed the support. "There are people close to the throne," she said. "People with rank, power, and access. They watch every order I give, every meeting, every message. They smile in court and they bow in public, but they are not loyal." Aaron's mind returned at once to the hall. The heavy guard presence, the whispers, the smile on Chief Minister Sarek's face. "The minister?" he said quietly. The Empress looked at him, but she did not answer directly. That told him enough. For a moment, anger rose in his chest, not because he had been banished, but because she had been forced into it. "You could have told me," he said. Her eyes hardened with pain. "No, I could not. If I had warned you, they would have seen it. They were watching me, even in the court. I had one chance to make them believe I had cut you off." Yuan turned away and walked toward the window. The glass was old and scratched. Beyond it, the lower city was dark and quiet. For half a second, neither of them moved. The weak light in the room shook softly as the old wall lamp buzzed. The shadow outside the window had been quick, just a dark shape sliding across the glass, but it was enough. Aaron's hand went at once to the small tool blade near the table. The Empress stepped back, pulling her cloak tighter around herself. Yuan crossed the room in 2 silent steps and pressed himself to the wall beside the window. He listened. Nothing. No footsteps, no voices, only the low sound of wind moving between the narrow streets below. He slowly lifted one corner of the curtain and looked out. The lower city was dark, with most windows already black. A transport line glowed faintly in the distance. The alley beneath the building was empty still. He did not relax. He checked the window lock, then looked down the hallway through the crack. Under the door, no movement there either. When he turned back, the Empress was watching him with tired eyes. "Did you see anyone?" she asked. "No," Yuan said. "That does not mean no one was there." That answer made her jaw tighten. He returned to the table and finally took the black data key from her hand. It was colder than he expected. Old make, heavy, not the kind of storage used for simple records. This was secure archive grade, the kind built to survive damage and stay hidden. "Sit," he said. For a moment she looked surprised, maybe because no one gave orders to an Empress. But then she nodded and sat on the single chair. Un remained standing. He placed the key into his small data pad. The old screen flashed once, then lines of coded files filled it, even before he opened them. He knew this was serious. The first folder held shipment records from military supply channels. The second showed private transfers through palace accounts. The third was marked with an old imperial symbol used only for sealed emergency matters. Yuan opened that one. First, inside were names of ministers, names of fleet officers, names of trade leaders. Some were expected, some made no sense at all. One name belonged to a judge known for public loyalty. Another belonged to a science minister who had praised the Empress only 2 days earlier. This was not one enemy, it was a network. Yuan looked up. "How long have you known?" The Empress lowered her gaze to the floor for a moment. Pieces of it for months. The full shape, only recently. He scrolled through more files. "Hush. And you kept this hidden from your own court." "My own." "Court is the problem," she said. There was no anger in her voice now, only exhaustion. Owen leaned against the table and read deeper. One file showed coded contact with an external group beyond Imperial space. Another showed strange cargo entering through old underground routes beneath the palace. Energy cells, signal blockers, restricted systems hardware. That made his eyes narrow. "These are not gifts for bribed nobles," he said. "This is equipment." "Yes," the Empress replied quietly. "For what?" She looked at the black window, as if she hated the answer already. "For a seizure of power." The room felt colder. EREN kept reading. "Why not arrest them?" "At first I thought I could," she said. "But every time I pushed, evidence vanished. Witnesses changed their words. Loyal officers were moved, delayed, or discredited. And then one of my intelligence chiefs died in what the report called a shuttle failure." Owen looked up sharply. "You think it was murder?" "I know it was." He studied her face. There was no doubt there. For the first time that night, Un understood how trapped she really was. She was not a ruler holding all the power. She was a woman sitting on a throne surrounded by smiling knives. He opened the sealed emergency folder. This time, the screen requested bloodline clearance. The Empress stood, crossed the room, and pressed her thumb to the pad. The lock opened at once. A hidden map appeared. It showed the palace from below. Old tunnels, forgotten chambers. Deep vaults under the central court. Most of them were marked in red, but one section was outlined in gold and sealed with ancient script. Eon stared at it. "What is this?" the Empress answered, with visible reluctance. "An old command chamber. Built during the First Imperial Age. For what purpose?" She hesitated. Then she said, "To control the original defense system of the capital." Aaron's eyes returned to the map. Ancient defense systems were not myths. Every major empire had old machines buried under its greatest cities. Some still worked, some were dead. Some were too dangerous to test, if that chamber still functions. He began. "They could control the palace," she said. He shook his head slowly. "More than the palace." She gave a grim nod. "The Central Fleet Network. City shield arrays. Drone towers. Ground cannons. Emergency lock grids." Yuan looked at her in disbelief. "And your enemies know this?" "We believe they are searching for access." He let out a slow breath. "Then, this is not just a coup. This is control of the Empire's heart." "Yes." Silence followed. The wall lamp buzzed again. Somewhere outside, a vehicle passed below, its sound fading quickly. Yuan studied the map one more time. "Why tell me now?" The Empress stood very still. "'Cause if they move soon, I may not be able to stop them from inside." It gave a dry, humorless laugh. "Oh. So you banish me in public and recruit me in secret." At that, something like shame crossed her face. "It was cruel," she said. "I know." "It was effective," Yuan replied. That surprised her. He removed the data key and held it in his palm. "You came here because you need someone outside their view." "Yes, someone they think has already fallen." "Yes." He thought of the hall again. The smiles, the whispers, the satisfaction on certain faces. Let them believe he was finished. That could be useful. Then his eyes went back to the screen. One line, near the bottom, had just loaded fully. A transfer approval code, signed by Chief Minister Sarek. Aaron's face hardened, but just under it was a second authorization mark, not Sarek. Someone else, someone higher in military access than a minister should reach. He looked at the Empress. You said there were names, he said. But this one matters more than the rest. Her expression changed. Whose mark is it? Yuen turned the screen toward her. The moment she saw it, all color left her face. It cannot be, she whispered. Aaron's voice dropped. It belongs to the captain of your royal guard. And in that same moment, from far above the city, the palace warning bells began to ring. The first warning bell rang across the capital, like a blade of sound. Then came the second, then the third. From the small room above the dark street, Yuen and the Empress both turned toward the window. Even from this far below the palace heights, the bells were clear. They rolled through the night air with cold force, warning every district that something had happened inside the imperial walls. But what? An looked back at the screen. The name was still there. Captain Vale Ren, Royal Guard. Commander. The man responsible for the Empress's safety. The man whose duty was to die before any threat reached her, and his access mark was attached to secret underground transfers linked to a possible coup. The Empress stepped closer to the table, her face pale and still. No, she said softly, as if refusing the truth could hold it back. Vale has served my house for 12 years. Yuen did not answer at once. He had seen this before, though never at this scale. The most dangerous traitors were never the loud enemies. They were the trusted ones, the ones who knew every door, every habit, every weakness. He closed the file and removed the data key. The bells, he said. What do they mean? The Empress forced herself to think. 3 night bells from the palace usually mean a security breach or an internal lockdown. Could they know you are gone? She gave a small, tight shake of the head. Not yet. I left a stand-in signal in my chambers. It should still show my life signs. Should. She did not like that word. Neither did he. Un moved to the window again and looked up toward the distant palace. Its highest towers were bright against the night sky. But now he could see movement, more transport lights than normal, moving between the upper levels like sharp insects. Something had changed. Behind him, the Empress said quietly, If Vale is part of this, then I have been surrounded from both the court and the guard. Unturned. And if Sarek is working with him, then this has been planned for a long time. She met his eyes. Yes. For a moment, the room fell silent, except for the dying echo of the bells. Then, Yuen began to move with purpose. He pulled on his dark outer coat and secured the small blade at his side. He checked the charge on his old datapad, then tucked the black key into an inner pocket. The Empress watched him. What are you doing? Thinking ahead. To what? To what happens when they stop hiding. She took one step toward him. You cannot go back there. Not openly. That is not what I meant. Un looked at her. In the palace, she was always measured, always controlled. Here, that control was thinner. Fear had worn it down. If they learn you came here, he said, then they will move faster. They may already be moving. Then we move first. The Empress lowered her voice. Yuen, listen to me. If this is really Sarek and Vale, then they will expect any direct response. Every official road is watched. Every secure line may be listened to. Every loyal officer near me may already be marked. Then we do not use official roads, secure lines, or marked officers, he said. That answer stopped her. Yuen returned to the table and opened a city map. Who is still loyal outside the palace network? She thought for only a moment. Very few. I do not need many. She slowly listed names. A records archivist in the old civil quarter. A retired shuttle. Commander who once served her mother. The knock came once, soft, careful, not the knock of a drunk man, not the hard strike of city police, and not the rushed panic of a frightened neighbor. It was measured, patient, the kind of knock made by someone who believed the person inside would. Open the door. Yuan raised one hand at once, signaling the Empress to stay back. She moved away from the center of the room without a word and stepped into the narrow shadow beside the bed. There was nowhere good to hide in a room this small, but darkness was better than open light. She pulled her cloak close and held perfectly still. Another knock. Eren did not go to the door this time. He first crossed to the lamp and lowered it, dimming the room until only a weak yellow glow remained. Then he moved toward the wall, not the center, and reached the door from the side. His fingers rested on the handle, but he did not open it. "Who is it?" he asked. For a moment, there was no answer. Then a man's voice came through the wood, low and uncertain. "Delivery from downstairs?" Eren's eyes narrowed. "I ordered nothing." A pause followed. Then the same voice replied, "The owner said it was already paid for." Lai Yuan knew the owner of this building well enough after one short evening to know the old man would never pay for anything from his own pocket. Not even a cup of cheap tea. He looked toward the Empress. She understood at once. Someone was testing the room. Maybe they did not know who was inside. Maybe they only suspected. But no honest delivery came this late after the warning bells. To a man who had just rented his room, Un stepped back from the door and spoke louder. "Leave it outside." Again, silence. Then came a different answer. "We were told to see it handed over directly." No reply. That was all Yuan needed. He moved away from the door fast and crossed to the window. Below, the alley was still. Dark, but now he could make out a faint reflection in the opposite glass. Two figures in the hallway outside. One near the door, another farther back. Not neighbors, not workers. The Empress whispered, "How many?" "At least two, maybe more downstairs." Her face hardened. "They found us too quickly. Maybe they followed you." A shadow passed over her expression. She had thought of that already. Yuan checked the window lock and opened it carefully. Cold night air slipped into the room. He looked down. The drop to the alley was not deadly, but it was bad enough to break a leg if taken wrong. To the left, a narrow service ledge ran along the wall toward an old drain pipe. Not safe, but possible. The knock came again. This time, harder. "Open the door," the voice said. The fake politeness was gone now. Yuan turned to the Empress. "Can you climb?" She looked at the open window, then back at him. "I can if the choice is that or capture." Good. A heavy strike hit the door. Wood cracked near the lock. No more time. Un pulled the table across the room and shoved it against the door. It would not stop trained men for long, but it would by seconds. He grabbed his coat, the datapad, and the black key. Then he guided the Empress to the window. "Step onto the ledge," he said. "Keep one hand on the wall. Do not look down." The door shook again under a stronger hit. The Empress climbed through first. For one brief moment, framed in the dark window above the sleeping street, she looked less like a ruler and more like a fugitive from her own empire. Her boots found the ledge. One hand pressed to the stone. The other gripped the drainpipe. She did not panic. That impressed Yuan. He climbed out after her and pulled the window almost closed behind them, leaving only a narrow gap. The room looked empty now from the outside, but the broken door would tell the truth soon enough. They began to move sideways along the ledge. The wall was cold and rough under their hands. Wind pushed lightly against them from above. Below, the Alley seemed far away, even though it was only 2 floors down. Every step had to be slow. Every breath had to stay quiet. Behind them, the door burst open. Boots entered the room. Window? Someone shouted. Too late. UN and the Empress had reached the drainpipe. He tested it once. Old, but strong enough. He went down first, quickly, but carefully, then looked up and guided her movements as she followed. When her boots touched the ground, he caught her arm to steady her. She pulled free at once, not out of anger, but training. Even now, under danger, she hated looking weak. From above, one of the men leaned out of the window. There. A flash of light burst from his hand. Energy shot into the alley wall beside them, spraying hot stone chips, so the men were not trying to bring them in quietly anymore. They were trying to end it. Run, said. They moved into the dark alley at once, turning hard at the first corner. The lower city became a maze around them, tight passages, hanging wires, stacked balconies, old market roofs, dim transport signs flickering blue and red in the distance. Unnew cities. Like this. Palaces were built for control. Lower districts were built by survival. They twisted, changed, and hid their own. Behind them came shouts. The pursuers were close. The Empress kept pace better than he expected, though her breathing grew sharper. As they crossed a narrow lane and slipped under a half-closed market gate, Un led her through a storage passage over a low wall and into a service street lined with dead machines and cargo bins. Only then did he slow. We cannot keep running. Blind, she said. We are not. You end? He pointed across the street to an old transport garage with no lights on the front sign. Its metal shutters were down, but one side door was cracked open by less than an inch. The Empress frowned. You know this place? No, he said, but someone is inside. She looked at him sharply. Friend or enemy? Yuan watched. The dark opening for 1 second more. Then a familiar voice came from within. If you both want to live. The voice said, get inside, now. Aaron's grip tightened on the blade at his side. Because he knew that voice, it belonged to Captain Vale Wren. For 1 sharp second, the world seemed to stop around them. The side door of the old transport garage stood open just enough to show darkness. Inside, no face, no movement. Only that voice, calm and clear, carrying out into the cold service street. Captain Vale Wren. The same man whose access mark had appeared in the secret files. The same man sworn to protect the Empress. The same man who might be part of the plot to destroy her. The Empress went still beside Yuan, in the weak street light. Her face lost all softness. The fear of the night was still there, but now it had changed shape. It had turned into something colder. Betrayal. Did not move toward the door. His body shifted slightly, placing himself between the Empress and the opening. From the alley, behind them came distant shouts. Their hunters were still searching nearby. Vale's voice came again, lower now. You have less than 10 seconds. Yuan answered without stepping closer. Give me one reason to trust you. There was a pause. Then the door opened wider. Captain Vale stepped into view with both hands visible and empty. He was still in Royal Guard black, but without his formal cloak or shoulder sigil. His short dark hair was damp, and there was dirt across one side of his face, as if he had come through service tunnels or old maintenance routes. He looked less like the polished commander of the palace and more like a man who had been fighting his own war all night. Most important of all, he was alone. The Empress's voice cut through the street like ice. You do not get to stand in front of me and look surprised, Captain. Kay lowered his eyes for 1 second, then looked back at her. Your Majesty, if I wanted you dead, I would not be waiting in a garage. That is not an answer, Un said. No, Vale replied. It is the truth. Bootsteps echoed somewhere close behind them. Un glanced toward the alley mouth. Time was running thin. Vale spoke quickly. The files you saw were meant to be found. Aaron's head turned back sharply. Explain. The access mark under my name is real, Vale said. I placed it there myself. The Empress stared at him, anger and disbelief mixing in her eyes. Why? Because Surek's people were already inside the transport chain. I needed them to believe I was part of the network. It was the only way to see how far the rot had spread. UN did not lower his guard. And how far did it spread? Vale's expression darkened. Farther than even I feared. He reached slowly into his coat. Aaron's blade came up at once. Vale stopped. Data chip, he said. Nothing else. He pulled out a small silver chip and held it by the edge. I was trying to get this to the Empress when the bells started. Her signal in the palace chambers changed pattern. Not enough for common systems to notice, but enough for me. I knew she had moved. The Empress looked at him with hard suspicion. So you followed me. I followed the men sent after you, he said. Not you. That answer landed heavily. From the next street, someone shouted, check the lower service lane. Vale turned his head toward the sound, then back to them. This is not the place. Inside. Now. Unstudied him one last second, then made the decision. Staying in the open was worse than entering a trap they might still survive. He nodded once. To the Empress. She did not like it, but she trusted his reading of danger. They went in. Vale shut the side door behind them and locked it with a steel bar. The garage was dark except for one low work lamp near the back wall. Old transport frames stood in rows like sleeping metal animals. Oil, dust, and machine heat filled the air. Vale led them between two cargo haulers and stopped beside a stripped engine table. No one followed me here, he said. Un stayed standing. The Empress did the same. Talk, she ordered. Vale placed the silver chip on the table and slid it toward her. The blue map hung in the air like a prophecy. Unstudied every line of the old maintenance route Vale had revealed. It wound beneath the palace like a hidden vein, older than the throne itself, forgotten by everyone except men like Vale, who had spent years learning the true shape of imperial power. The Empress did not look away from the glowing lines. How much time? She asked. Vale checked an old chronometer on the engine table. Space was cracked, but the hands still moved. 3 hours until the first guard shift change. They will be focused on external perimeter during that window. Internal. Patrols thin out. And after? UN asked. After, Surek's people will be everywhere. The Empress raised her hand, and the map froze in place. She studied the lowest chamber, the one marked with the ancient imperial seal. This command system, she said. What exactly does it control? Vale hesitated in a way that told Un the answer would be bad. Everything the First Empire used to hold power, Vale said finally. Fleet communications. Capital defense grids. Ground-based weapons. Systems. Emergency lockdown protocols. The entire infrastructure of control built 10,000 years ago. Aaron's eyes narrowed, and it still functions. Partially, Vale said, the bloodline key can activate the rest. The Empress turned toward him. You mean my blood? The genetic code embedded in your line, Vale corrected. No one else can open the deepest protocols. Not even an emperor could do it without your family's mark. She was silent for a moment. Then she said, Sarek cannot use me to take control unless he has both bloodline access and the command sequence. If I go down there and stop them before they can force the activation, the system stays locked. You aren't finished. And the coup collapses, Vale added. But his voice carried doubt. Uncaught it at once. There is something else. Vale turned away slightly. That was answer enough. Say it, the Empress commanded. Vale faced her again, and this time there was no shield in his eyes, only hard truth. If you activate the command system yourself, even to lock it, there is a feedback protocol built in. It was designed that way during the first age of safeguard. No one person should be able to control such power alone. The Empress understood before he finished. It would kill me. It would, Vale said quietly. Yuan felt the weight of that word settle in the room like stone. The Empress did not react with fear. She simply nodded once, as if accepting a fact she had always known was coming. Then there must be another way. There is, Yuan said. Both of them looked at him. He was studying the map again, his finger tracing paths. You do not activate the system. You destroy it. Vale's expression hardened. That would require explosives, expert knowledge, and the ability to reach the core chamber without triggering the automated defense grid. Then we do all three, Yuan said. For the first time that night, a small, almost desperate smile crossed the Empress's face. You make it sound simple. It is not, Yuan said. But it does not require your blood as a key. It only requires someone willing to break things. Vale moved to an old storage locker against the back wall. He pulled out a heavy bag and set it on the engine table. Inside were tools, not small ones, but serious industrial equipment. I prepared this in case the direct approach failed, he said. But I was planning for a small strike team. How many people do we have? The Empress asked. 3, Yuan said. And that is all we need. She looked at him. You sound certain. Palaces are built for control, Yuan replied. But control means predictable. Predictable means we can move through the spaces they think are secure, especially if those spaces have not been used in centuries. Vale pulled out a small device that looked like an old compass. This will guide us through the maintenance tunnels. It is attuned to the old imperial frequencies. Modern systems will not detect it. They began to move. Vale led them toward the back of the garage, past sleeping machines and stacked metal. Behind a false wall panel, narrow steps descended into darkness. Old stone, old air. The smell of deep earth and rust. An looked back once at the level above. Somewhere out there, hunters were still searching the lower city streets. Somewhere above, in the palace towers, Sarek and Kor were likely reviewing final details for the dawn ceremony. Somewhere between those 2 points, a coup was being carefully staged, and somewhere in the darkness below, the fate of an empire was waiting to be decided. The Empress descended first. Vale followed. Yuan came last, pulling a stone panel shut behind them. The darkness was absolute. Vale activated a small light on his chronometer, and it cast a weak glow against ancient walls. The passages were narrow and low, forcing them to move slowly. Water dripped somewhere far away. The air grew colder as they walked. The Empress spoke to Yuan without turning her head. If we fail, you understand what happens. Yes, he said. They take the throne and remake the empire. Worse, she said. They give control to an admiral who believes humanity is weak. He will tear apart the trade agreements. He will push the empire toward war with external powers. Billions will suffer. Un said nothing, because she was right. This was not about saving one ruler anymore. It was about the shape of the future itself. They walked deeper into the darkness. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 minutes, the passage opened into a wider chamber. Vale stopped and raised his hand. Ahead, the tunnel split into 3 directions. Vale checked his compass. One path glowed faintly red. That is the old command entrance, he whispered. The Empress looked at it like she was looking at her own grave. "How long to reach the core?" Yuan asked. 5 minutes, Vale said. "If nothing has changed, and if something has." Vale did not answer. The Empress took one breath, straightened her shoulders, and moved forward into the red glowing path. Un and Vale followed as they descended further. The walls began to show faint markings, old imperial symbols, warnings. In dead languages, strange mathematical patterns. This was a place built to be forgotten. A place built to wait at the end of the path. A sealed door rose before them. Its surface was smooth, dark metal. No lock, no handle. Just a flat expanse marked with a single symbol, the mark of the first imperial bloodline. The Empress placed her palm against it. The metal was warm. For a second, nothing happened. Then the door began to open, and beyond it, deep below the palace, the ancient command chamber was waiting with all its power, all its danger, and all its impossible choices. Waiting inside,